David had spent most of his life inside that old garage on Maple Street. For 3 decades, his hands were stained with grease, his clothes always smelled of engine oil, and his back ached from years bent over broken cars. But none of that mattered. Because to David, that garage wasn't just a job, it was his second home. He knew every inch of it. Which lift made that odd creaking sound? Which toolbox had a busted latch? And which customer always arrived late, but never forgot to say thank you? But more than anything, David knew the cars. He treated each one like a living being, fixing them with care. Never rushing, never cutting corners. Over the years, David saw bosses come and go, mechanics join, and leave, but he stayed. The neighborhood called him Old Dave. But behind that nickname was a man who had given everything to that place. Yet loyalty isn't always rewarded. One cold Monday morning, David showed up at 7 a.m. sharp, just like he always did, expecting another day of fixing engines. But something was different. A shiny new car was parked outside, and a tall, sharply dressed man stood beside it, chatting with the younger mechanics. David walked over, wiping his hands with an old rag. "Morning. You must be new around here," he greeted with a smile. These man turned and looked at David, like he was seeing something obsolete. "I'm not new," he said coldly. "I'm the new owner, Brian Carter. Bought the garage last week." David's smile faltered, but he stayed polite. "Oh, welcome. I've been here 30 years. Let me know if you need anything." Brian didn't respond. Instead, he called the mechanics together. "Listen up," he announced. "We're modernizing this garage. No more wasted time. No more old-school methods. I want fresh, fast, efficient workers. We're cutting out dead weight." Then he turned to David. "That includes you, old man." David froze. "I've worked here since I was 22. I've fixed thousands of cars. You can't just—" But Brian cut him off. "You're too slow, too old, too soft. You're done. Pack your stuff." The younger workers exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them spoke. They were too afraid of losing their own jobs. Quietly, David walked to his small locker. His hands trembled, not from age, but because his whole life was being taken from him in a moment. He packed a small box, his tools, some old photographs, and an oil-stained notebook full of tricks he'd learned over the years. As he stepped out of the garage for the last time, he looked back. No one said goodbye. No one stopped him. The garage door slammed shut behind him. The next few weeks were brutal. David's savings dwindled. Rent on his small apartment was due. Every morning he still woke up at 6 a.m. out of habit, only to realize he had nowhere to go. Worse, people in town whispered about him. The old mechanic who got fired. Poor guy. Some friends tried to help, offering odd jobs, but no one wanted to hire a 52-year-old mechanic when they could get younger, cheaper labor. David spent most days at a quiet diner near the garage, staring out the window, watching cars go by, wondering where it all went wrong. Maria, the waitress, always brought his coffee without him asking. One day, as he sat there staring at the empty street, she sat across from him and said, "You know, everyone in this town knows. You're the best mechanic we've ever had. That garage may have fired you, but they can't erase the years you gave this place." David offered a weak smile, but said nothing. That night, lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling. He thought about all the people who'd come into the garage with broken cars and left with a smile. He thought about how he'd taught younger mechanics the tricks of the trade, how he'd stay late to help a single mom who couldn't afford repairs. And then, an idea began to form. Maybe he didn't need that garage. Maybe he could build something better. A week later, something strange happened. That Friday morning, the workers arrived at the old garage and saw an envelope taped to the door. Inside was no letter, just a small worn wrench. David's wrench. The one he always carried. Attached was a handwritten note. "You can take away a man's job, but you can't take away his hands." The workers looked at each other, confused. Brian scoffed and crumpled the note. But that was just the beginning. Across town, a small, long-abandoned mechanic's shed suddenly had lights on. People spotted David there, cleaning up late at night, fixing old tools, repainting the sign. No one knew what he was up to, yet. But they were about to find out. That shed, forgotten for years, was alive again. Every night, long after the town slept, a single bulb flickered from inside. David worked silently, wiping down tools, fixing broken equipment, organizing dusty shelves. He didn't have fancy machines or modern scanners, no sleek uniforms, just his hands, his experience, a lifetime of skill. A month passed. Then whispers began. At diners, gas stations, grocery stores. "Did you hear? Old Dave's fixing up that shed." "Why? Maybe he's opening his own garage." Then one morning, a hand-painted wooden sign appeared outside the shed. "David's Honest Auto Fixed Right. Fixed Fair." It wasn't big. It wasn't fancy. But it was his. At first, no one came. People were used to the modern garage on Maple Street, the one David had given his life to, the one now owned by Brian Carter. Brian wasn't worried. He laughed when he heard about David's shed. "Some old man fixing cars in a dump? He won't last a month." But the universe has a funny way of working. One day, a woman named Mrs. Riley walked into David's garage. Her car had been at Brian's shop twice, and they'd charged her without fixing the problem. "I don't know what else to do," she said, tears in her eyes. "They told me it's hopeless." David smiled gently. "Nothing's hopeless. Ma'am, let me take a look." Within 30 minutes, her car purred to life. No fake repairs, no extra charges. Just honest work. The next day, she told everyone at the diner. Then came an elderly man with a rusty pickup, a young mother who couldn't afford costly shops, a school bus driver who needed someone he could trust. One by one, they came. In Tribe, a town full of fast talk and high prices, David offered something rare: honesty. His garage became a place where people felt safe, where they weren't treated like walking wallets, where they mattered. Meanwhile, over at Brian's, things fell apart. Complaints piled up about overcharging, sloppy repairs, rude service. One by one, his mechanics quit, tired of being treated like machines. One morning, Brian walked into his office to find 3 empty desks and a stack of refund requests. Frustrated, he slammed his fist on the desk. "How is that old man ruining my business?" But David wasn't ruining anything. It was the difference between someone who cared and someone who didn't. 6 months after David opened his garage, something unexpected happened. The city's annual Mechanic of the Year award was announced. Oh, big deal in their small town. For 30 years, David had never been nominated. He didn't advertise. He just worked. But this year was different. The entire town submitted letters, handwritten notes, from customers, neighbors, even children who remembered him fixing their family cars. On the night of the ceremony, David sat quietly in the back in an old but clean jacket, expecting nothing. Then the announcer spoke, and the crowd erupted. "This year's award goes to David Miller for 30 years of honest work, kindness, and service to our community." As David walked to the stage, the room stood and clapped. Some had tears in their eyes. They weren't just applauding a mechanic. They were honoring a man who never gave up on them, even when life gave up on him. In the front row, Brian Carter sat stiffly, watching the man he once called dead weight now standing in the spotlight. The next morning, something even more surprising happened. Brian walked into David's garage. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Brian finally said, I underestimated you. David looked up from under a car hood, wiping his hands. No, he said calmly. You underestimated kindness and experience and hard work. Brian nodded silently and left. Weeks later, David's garage was busier than ever. Maria, the waitress who used to bring him coffee when he was down, now delivered sandwiches to the garage every afternoon, smiling at the long line of cars. Outside, one evening, as David was locking up, a young boy walked up. "Sir, my bike chain broke. I can't fix it." David knelt down, inspected it, and within minutes had the chain back in place. The boy beamed. "You're really good at fixing things." David smiled and replied softly, "Sometimes, kid, it's not just things I'm fixing,